Causes of the French Revolution. Let's start with the long-term causes. First of all, France had an absolute monarchy. Monarchy means a government that's ruled by one person, a king or a queen. Absolute means complete or total. So they had a king that ruled with total power, and this was problematic because it meant there wasn't much opportunity for the people to have their voice heard. Second cause was that there was extreme social inequality. France had three estates or classes in society. The first estate was the clergy, the second the nobility, and the third estate was everyone else. The third estate included the bourgeoisie, which is a French word meaning the middle class, and the peasants, who were the poor, the farm workers. In French society, most of the people were poor peasants who were surviving on bread, not eating much of anything else. Their lives were very hard. The middle class, or the bourgeoisie, was just 10% of the population, and the nobility, which included the clergy, was 1%, yet they had a lot of privilege and wealth and didn't have to pay taxes. In France, the only people who paid taxes were the third estate, the peasants and the bourgeoisie, even though the peasants had the least money to give. The Enlightenment had a big impact on the French Revolution because the Enlightenment was a new spirit of thinking in the 1700s in Europe, where people were beginning to use reason to solve social problems and think about how to create progress. The Enlightenment made people think of radical new ideas, such as the notion that all people are born equal, that all people have rights, and that government should be for the people and by the people. The American Revolution was also very influential on the French because it happened before the French Revolution. In 1776, the European colonists who were living in America declared their independence using Enlightenment ideas. Its impact on the French was that it inspired the French to have a revolution of their own. Let's turn to short-term causes. These are the events that led to the French Revolution. First of all, France had a lot of debts because they were going to war with a lot of countries. They helped also the Americans by sending them money to pay for their war against England. So the king, King Louis XVI, raised taxes. And do we remember who had to pay the taxes? The third estate, which were mostly the peasants, the poor people. So how did those folks feel about it? What would you think if you were very poor and yet you were the main group of people getting taxed? The next thing that happened is in 1789, the year of the Revolution, there was a very bad winter. The weather was terrible. There was not much grain, so the price of bread was very high. This is significant because people lived on bread and not a whole lot more. So bread prices increased because of a bad harvest, and people reacted very angrily and violently. They started rioting. The king called together representatives from the three estates or the three classes of people. But because the people in the third estate were starting to suggest radical ideas like maybe the first and second estate should pay taxes too, the king did not like their ideas and felt threatened, so he locked them out of the meeting called the Estates General. When they were locked out of the Estates General, they decided to have their own meeting. So they went next door to an indoor tennis court and they formed what they called the National Assembly. And the members of the Third Estate made a pledge to each other to start a new constitution. They called this the Tennis Court Oath. In this oath, they pledged to have a government that would be for the people and by the people. Well, there's a lot of unrest in France, and the king calls in the army to calm things down. The people form their own militias or informal armies. They get their hands on some guns from one government building, and then they go to this building, the Bastille. The Bastille is an old prison where enemies of the king were imprisoned and tortured. To the people, this was a symbol of the king's oppression. So they stormed the Bastille. That means they took it by force. They seized the gunpowder, and essentially what they were doing was starting a rebellion against the government, and the revolution was on.